The woman sitting in that interrogation room had spent the last month living inside a house with a decomposing body sealed in the shed out back. She had taken a vacation to Orlando. She had gone to school. She had come home, cooked dinner, and kept right on moving. And now, as detectives laid out exactly what their surveillance footage had captured, the reality of her exposure became impossible to contain. Everything she had said, every call she had made, every plan she had whispered inside that house had been recorded and uploaded directly to the cloud. The cameras in the kitchen and living room had been rolling the entire time. On the 10th of February 2025, officers in Ohio responded to a 911 tip, claiming a body had been concealed in a shed behind a residential property. When law enforcement arrived and forced open that outbuilding, they found the decomposing remains of 80-year-old David Cole Sr., sealed inside a tarp and left to decay for nearly 2 months. The two people who owned that house, who had served as David Sr.'s primary caregivers for years, were his son David Cole Jr. and Jr.'s 37-year-old wife. To anyone who asked, they had been telling a consistent story. The old man had relocated to a care facility in another city. He was fine. He was being taken care of. What no one outside that house understood was that the home's own security cameras had documented the final hours of David Sr.'s life, recorded the conversations that followed his death, and captured the exact moment David Jr. discovered what his wife had done. Detectives had seen all of it before they ever brought Brittany into the room for her second formal interview. They read her Miranda rights, sat down across from her, and began walking her through a timeline she had already contaminated with weeks of calculated deception. The early portion of the interrogation was deliberately unhurried. Detectives established the basic scaffolding of December and the days surrounding Christmas. David Sr.'s birthday had fallen on December 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, and the family had celebrated with him. Brittany confirmed this. She also confirmed that the following day, December 26th, she and her husband and her daughter departed for a planned trip to Orlando, Florida, a vacation that had been in the works for roughly 2 years. David Sr. had been invited. He declined, saying the travel would be too taxing. A man named Adrian, the boyfriend of Brittany's daughter, had a set of house keys and was supposed to look in on the old man and the dogs while the family was away. Brittany claimed that whenever she called to check in from Florida, Adrian reported that everything was fine. The family returned to the house on New Year's Day. Brittany stated she went back to check on David Sr. immediately and found him doing well, complaining only of back pain, which she described as nothing unusual for him. Then the interrogation shifted to the question of when, precisely, David Sr. stopped being alive inside that house. Brittany had previously told investigators that she was the one who found him. Now she walked that back. It was her husband, she said, who discovered the body, and he called her while she was in class at her nursing program. She claimed the call came in before 10 in the morning, sometime during her 8 to 10 session. She described her husband as strangely flat during the call, not devastated the way she expected. He told her his father was gone. He said he had taken a pulse and confirmed it. He told her not to come home, that she should stay in class, that he would handle the necessary calls. When Brittany arrived home that evening, she described him as robotic, completely stripped of any visible grief. He told her everything had been taken care of. She said she accepted that, partly because she was already dealing with 2 deaths on her side of the family from the week prior, and partly because David had specifically told her not to go into his father's room. She put the date of that phone call at approximately January 8th. What Brittany was constructing in that room was a layered alibi, a version of events in which she was peripheral, reactive, and uninformed. Detectives knew better. Before confronting her directly, the lead investigator flagged something she needed to understand. The text message record pulled from her phone, combined with the footage from the home's interior cameras, painted a portrait of a woman who was not reacting to a crisis, but managing one she had personally created. Brittany was not a bystander. She was the architect. Her husband had covered up what she did, but the evidence made clear that he had not participated in what happened to David Sr. that Christmas night. The camera footage showed David Jr. standing in front of the lens, devastated, calling Brittany from inside the house on January 8th after he finally entered his father's room and found the state of the body. On that footage, he asked her how long his father had been dead. She told him 3 to 5 days. He told her the decomposition was already advanced enough that it had to be longer. That exchange was preserved. Detectives had watched it. David Jr.'s grief on that recording was raw and unperformable. He had not known. When pressed on what detectives had extracted from her phone, Brittany eventually acknowledged that she had texted a contact named Caitlin, a man named Frank Tolbert who worked in mortuary services, to ask about the process for removing a body from a residence. She initially claimed she sent those messages in December, not because David Sr. had died, but because she suspected he was declining and wanted to be prepared. Detectives pointed out that no reasonable person, and certainly no nursing student, would contact a mortuary worker to ask about body removal logistics before a person had actually died. The interrogator reminded her that she worked in healthcare. She knew how death in a domestic setting was handled. Brittany was running out of road, pushed directly on whether David Sr. had already been dead when the family left for Florida on December 26th. She held the denial for as long as she could manage, then confirmed it with a single word. Yes. What followed that admission was the reconstruction of what Brittany had actually done on Christmas morning. She had woken up at approximately 5 in the morning and found David Sr. unresponsive in his room. She did not call emergency services. She did not wake her husband. She woke the household up for Christmas, proceeded through the entire holiday with her father-in-law's body behind a closed door, and then the following morning left for Orlando with her family. Before the trip, she had typed the phrase into a search engine, "How long before a body begins to smell?" She ran that search on Christmas morning. She also texted her contact at the mortuary service asking about body disposal. Then she packed her bags and flew to Florida. The cameras in the house, which backed up to a cloud server she apparently did not think to disable, caught her re-entering the old man's room multiple times after returning from vacation on January 1st. She was not checking on a living person. She was going in, turning on the television set to manufacture the sound of someone awake and present, and then coming back out. For 8 full days after returning from the trip, she kept her husband away from that room by telling him the smell coming from behind the door was ordinary and that David Sr. simply did not want to be disturbed. Her husband, who had a documented aversion to strong odors, did not enter the room until January 8th. When the interrogator confronted Brittany with what the cameras had actually captured, she shifted her account again, this time acknowledging that she had found David Sr. dead on Christmas morning. She described trying to shake him awake. She described him lying on his back, pale, without pants, his arm positioned at his side. She said she froze. She said everything in her told her to report it, but she was overwhelmed by anxiety and she didn't. Then the line of questioning pivoted to what she had given him the night before. She initially described administering the standard dose of a sleep aid called ZzzQuil because David Sr. had complained about insomnia and back pain. "One measure," she said. When he asked for more an hour later, she said she hesitated but ultimately gave him a second dose because he insisted. The investigator stated plainly that ZzzQuil alone could not have caused this outcome. Something else had been administered. Brittany then admitted she had also given him Tylenol, describing it as a red and blue rapid-release formulation at 500 milligrams per tablet. The night before he died, she said, he had asked for 6 of them. She gave him all 6. That amounted to 3,000 milligrams of acetaminophen, combined with a double dose of sleep medication administered to a bedridden 80-year-old man who could not move without assistance. But the situation was still more lethal than even that. The interrogator kept pressing because the toxicology results coming back from the medical examiner's office were going to show exactly what had been in David Sr.'s system, and the formulation she described did not fully account for the level of suppression that would cause death in that time frame. Brittany eventually disclosed that the tablets were not standard Tylenol. They were Tylenol 3, the codeine-containing formulation. She had taken them from a prescription belonging to her daughter following a tonsillectomy. At 9:30 on the night of December 24th, she gave David Sr. 3 Tylenol, 3 tablets along with 60 milliliters of ZzzQuil. She knew the recommended dose for the sleep aid was 15 milliliters. When she went back at 11 o'clock and he said the pain was still unbearable, and when he told her he wanted to go be with his deceased wife Janet, she gave him 3 more codeine tablets, 6 Tylenol 3S within 2 hours, layered on top of 4 times the recommended quantity of a sedating sleep agent. The detective asked her directly, when she administered that second set of tablets to a man who had just told her he wanted to die, did she understand what would happen? She answered yes. He asked her what. She said he would die. The financial dimension of this case transformed the motive from something ambiguous into something unambiguous. David Sr. was receiving $2,300 per month in Social Security payments. Brittany had recently stopped working. David Jr. had not been employed in any meaningful way for an extended period. He was home playing video games and doing occasional delivery driving, while Brittany managed nursing school, caregiving, and household expenses. The financial pressure in that house was severe, and David Sr.'s monthly income was a significant component of the budget. After his death on Christmas morning, those payments continued to land in the account. The December disbursement arrived when David Sr. had already been dead for days. The January disbursement arrived weeks into the concealment. David Jr., once he was told the cover story on January 8th, transferred those funds to cover the household's bills. The family told everyone who asked that David Sr. had moved to Cincinnati to live with a brother. The cover-up itself was a coordinated multi-person operation, even if the original act was Brittany's alone. After David Jr. discovered his father's condition on January 8th, he did not contact authorities. Instead, the couple spent the following days discussing the smell, ordering a mattress encasement bag from a shared Amazon account, and debating how to dispose of the remains. David Jr. complained in texts that he could not eat because of the odor. He noted that opening the windows made no difference. He purchased automatic scent dispensers and mounted them to the walls. When the mattress bag arrived in the wrong size, Brittany tried to fit it over their own bed before realizing the error. Eventually, the bag, originally ordered under the stated pretext of treating a bedbug infestation, was used to wrap David Sr.'s body. Brittany physically dragged the body from the bedroom, down the hallway, and into the sunroom. She retrieved a tarp from the gazebo in the backyard. She wrapped the body herself. David Jr. helped seal it. The remains sat in the sunroom for 1 to 2 additional days before David Jr. disconnected both interior cameras and moved his father's body into the shed, where it remained for weeks until someone made the call that brought law enforcement to the property on February 10th. Brittany's 16-year-old daughter had known since Christmas Day. She was present in that house, aware of what had happened, and had been told by her mother to maintain the cover story. Her older daughter, who was nearly 18, had stopped communicating with Brittany entirely in the days leading up to her birthday. The minor's awareness of the concealed death resulted in additional criminal charges against both Brittany and David Jr. for child endangerment. The home had become a crime scene in which a minor child could not escape, could not report, and could not leave. Brittany Cole entered a guilty plea to murder and abuse of a corpse. She was sentenced to life imprisonment with parole eligibility after serving 16 years. David Cole Jr. was convicted on charges including tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, gross abuse of a corpse, possession of criminal tools, and endangering a minor. His sentence was 9 years in custody. David Cole Sr. spent the final hours of his life alone in a room at the end of a hallway, bedridden, completely dependent on the people around him, asking to be put out of his pain. He had no idea the person administering his medication had already calculated that he would not survive the night.